The calendar for the day is House File 1444. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 1444 on the calendar for the day, the third engrossment, an act relating to government finance.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. House File 1444 funds transportation in the state. Please vote yes. I'm joking. I will try to get through this. You deserve, Mr. Speaker, members, you all deserve to know what's in this bill. I will get through it very quickly. But before I start, I wanted to give a few thank yous. We had a really tremendous staff support for our committee this year. Two amazing stalwarts from House Research. I don't see where they are exactly, but Matt Burris and Andrew Lee. Matt was from House Research. Andrew's the fiscal analyst, and they were amazing. We probably did 3 or 4 different versions of this bill, so they're saved somewhere on Matt Burris's computer, and he was just incredible. We had great partisan staff as well. Mark Nicely from the GOP, really a great guy and worked very well with everybody on the committee. Matt Scheer, the committee administrator, really hit the ground running and learned this issue well, and really appreciate all of his hard work. Katie Hatt is for DFL research for our committee, also wonderful, as well as Rachel Nelson, my LA and the CLA for the committee, all going above and beyond the call of duty for this issue. And then I also want to thank our Vice Chair, Representative Bernardi, who actually does a pretty good impersonation of me if you ever want to get some entertainment. Thank you. And Representative Earhart, who's the chair of the Policy Committee, of course, made incredible contributions on the finance side. I like to think of Representative Earhart as the conscience of transportation in this chamber. And last but not least, Representative Beard and I have been great friends since we came in together in 2002, and you're very, very helpful on a number of occasions. And I've always appreciated your friendship and your civility and the honest discussions we've been able to have together. So, members, quickly, I will go through the bill. Our first article are the appropriations, and the Transportation Finance Bill appropriates money for MnDOT, for the Metropolitan Council, and for about half of the expenses for the Department of Public Safety. And the main item in our appropriations is the $1.7 billion from the Trunk Highway Fund that's dedicated to roads and bridges in the state of Minnesota. We also have some additional funding, about $300 million from the federal government under the MAP 21 program, and that also is going to roads and bridges. Also some multimodal efforts as well on that. For the Metropolitan Council, we have their appropriation, which is pretty much their base from the past. This is a difference we have with the governor. The governor cut the Met Council, and we're restoring their funding. He was expecting money from a Metro sales tax, and we don't have that in our bill. And then finally, we have some appropriations for the Department of Public Safety. So, members, I was prepared to go through our 20 sections of the bill. I'm not going to do that. If you have some specific questions, please, ask them. But these are a lot of different member provisions, and we have several from the GOP side as well. And I did anticipate Representative Anderson's question on FTEs, so I want to answer that. We have a total of 18 FTEs in this bill. 9 are for capital security. This is for the Department of Public Safety. We have 7 for the title turnaround for the Department of Public Safety and enhance the titles. And then we have 2 for Representative Quam's bill for a land inventory for MnDOT. So with that, members, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I look forward to the debate.
Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the call of the House be lifted.
Representative Doubt moves that the call of the House be lifted. All in favor say aye. All opposed no. Motion prevails. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Beard moving to amend House File 1444, the third engrossment, as follows. The amendment is coded A17.
Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, the A17 amendment regards one of our favorite subjects in transportation finance, Department of Vehicle Services, and their funding of the MNLARS system. It's sort of an inside joke, but the Department Vehicle Services has been working on a massive redesign and rebuild of their computer system that has all the titles and driver's licenses in the state. Involved in that, it will be comporting with the computer system the Department of Public Safety is working on. Some of that was in Representative Paymar's bill. Folks, several years ago we levied a fee, an additional fee on driver's license transactions to help pay for this $90 or $100 million project. That fee will be collected until the project is funded, at which time it expires. Now, I know there's been a lot of new fees levied this year, and so in a small attempt to help out the citizens of the state, there are some fund balances over at the DVS that we can tap. Representative Hornstein, Representative Paymar tapped some of them, or some other things that Bureau of Criminal Apprehension that they do for driver services, but there's enough money to move over the money that's mentioned in this amendment that will go to the excuse me here while I actually get you the exact name of the account. Members, it'll go to the technology account. That will have the effect of reducing the length of time we'll have to collect this fee. It'll lengthen or shorten it by about 15 months and will be put to a use that we're already collecting a fee for. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd urge adoption of the amendment, and I'd ask for a roll call, if I may.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Beard. I understand your concern, and we have had, I think, going back to the days when Representative Holberg was the chair of this committee, have been waiting for this MNLAR system to come online. But this technology fee is applied evenly to all drivers. It will provide enough money to build out MNLARs by 2017, and I just don't see a need to shift around this technology fee at this time, and I know the Department of Public Safety opposes elimination of this fee. So I would respectfully ask the body to vote no on this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Beard moving to amend House File 1444, the third engrossment, as follows. The amendment is coded A18.
Representative Beard.
Okay, the A18 amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. There is a study that's authorized and money appropriated for in the bill that addresses transit vision going forward. Excuse me. Members, as part of this study, I'm asking that we asked the department to also lay a plan for and to investigate whether we can actually get to a 40% fare box recovery ratio for Metro Transit bus and rail operations. Members, we're about in the middle of the pack when it comes to the fare box recovery around the nation. I think we should strive to maybe be in the top 20%, the top decile. And so I'm asking just to include this as a study item in the bill, or in the report that we're asking MnDOT to prepare for transit operations. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for a green vote, and once again, I request a roll call on the amendment.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd request a no vote. We had a robust discussion of this issue in the Transportation Policy Committee. And, it was pointed out then, we saw some data that we're actually doing a little bit better, my understanding, than the middle of the pack. I think we were only behind San Diego, and San Diego was ahead of us because they have a train to Tijuana that's apparently very popular. Metro Transit has a competitive fare box recovery. Actually, it does a little better even than some of our suburban opt-outs. And so, members, this is just going to, if we have a 40% fare box recovery, we're going to have an astronomical increase in fares and a subsequent decrease in ridership. And for that reason, I would ask for a no vote.
Representative Beard.
Not to belabor the point, Mr. Speaker, but to be clear, this is not to require a 40% fare box recovery. It's to ask the Metropolitan Council to describe to us how we could possibly get to one if it's even possible. Thank you for the clarification.
Seeing no further discussion on the amendment, the clerk will take the roll. Clerk will close the roll. There being 61 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Anderson S. moving to amend House File 1444, the third engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A27.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this amendment does is it provides a greater percentage of the transit funding for the opt-outs that we have here in the state of Minnesota. There's several opt-out bus transit systems across the metro area, largely in suburban communities, and I'm asking that we put an additional 0.5% of transit funding to them from the Met Council's transit funding. So that's all this amendment does, and I'd ask for your green vote. I would also ask for a roll call too, please, Mr. Speaker.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you for your support of the opt-out system. They do a good job, and they're all part of our mix of transit options for our region. I'd ask for a no vote simply because we had a legislative auditor's report a couple of years ago, and actually Representative Beard spent quite a bit of time with this important report in his committee last year. And the report recommends that the Met Council should allocate supplemental MVEST revenue based on needs of the region. And the report then further stated that distributing funds based on a formula which is envisioned in this amendment is not a regional approach and would not consider where funds are needed most in the region. The opt-outs have never asked for this. They are in conversations ongoing with the Met Council about how this is allocated regionally, and so I just don't think this is needed, and I really want us to take seriously this legislative auditor's report. And I even talked with Representative Beard earlier tonight about how we may want to look at some Met Council governance issues coming up in the future, but I don't think this is needed, and I would urge a no vote.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hornstein, on your comments. However, I must say that in the opt-outs, they are servicing 5 million people per year. So 5 million people per year are served by the opt-outs, and that number is growing as the population in the suburban areas grow. So I would ask that you support this.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 64 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moving to amend House File 1444, the third engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A30.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Kind of continuing with the discussion about fare box recovery, this amendment would require that further expansion of transit lines actually be planned to include a collection system, sort of an off-board fare collection system that would really provide some additional security, and certainly it focuses on making sure that these lines are being covered by their costs. So that's the amendment.
Further discussion to the amendment? Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would urge a no vote. We have systems in place to address this problem, and I think this will add some additional costs that we simply can't afford. I'd urge a no vote.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a comment. I mean, I think most people you talk to assume that the riders' fares are covering all of the costs of these systems, and they're really shocked when they find out that no, it's more like 34%. There's been some interesting activity in a number of cities, including Phoenix and LA. They've decided that sort of this honor system is not working, and they are moving ahead to really step it up and do some new systems that do collect the fare before people enter the system.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment say aye. All opposed, no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moving to amend House File 1444, the third engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A31.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment regards the Northern Lights Express. This is a high-speed rail to Duluth from Minneapolis. There's been some discussion about it. Some counties are actually looking into the design and development of it. Other counties have dropped out. But there's already been $4 million expended. I doubt that there's been a vote taken anywhere. But, you know, I think folks who look at this realize that this is about a 2-hour trip by car. The train can hardly go any faster than that. And really, what is this going to do except add $1 billion of cost that will be quite a drain on our taxpayers? Thank you.
Representative Sundin.
Yes, I would like a roll call, Mr. Speaker, please.
Representative Runbeck asked for a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding this amendment, I'd like to inform the body here that every day in committee we talked about some deficiencies in Minnesota. It was safety deficiencies that ended up with people dead on the highways, congestion in the metro area, and the costs were also prohibitive of any project that were proposed. And if you think about it, it all came down to a lack of planning. Had we planned better for Highway 14 earlier, there'd be less people dead on Highway 14. If there was better planning, we wouldn't be realizing this congestion in the metro area. And as far as the cost, you know, that's always a struggle, but we will struggle with it, and we're going to get these projects done sooner or later. This project so far, we've got about $15 million into the planning. That's the matching funds from the federal government, I understand. And I think we should continue to take advantage of the opportunity of those matching funds for planning purposes. There's 150 other projects under consideration nationwide similar to this. And the construction funding for this, when we ultimately get it going, will be matched at an 80% rate from the federal government. So let's get on with this. Let's do the proper planning. Let's save lives. Let's avoid congestion on the highways and get this done. Thank you.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's accurate to say that this is nothing more than a casino train. It's a very special purpose train, and it's really not something that the broad general public should be supporting and funding. Thank you.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, members. For the reasons that Representative Sundin outlined, I would urge a no vote on this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 71 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Norris moving to amend House File 1444, the third engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A32.
Representative Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Back in 2009, this body passed a bill of mine, and I think Tory Westrom was also a co-author at that time, which authorized the use of mini trucks on some of our township and county roads, with the local authorities being the deciding factor on whether or not they'd be permitted. We have 7 counties in the state of Minnesota since 2009 that have done that. We would like to have more. It's a hodgepodge. And so my legislation, members, would actually change the law to authorize the use of the mini trucks statewide unless the local authority pass an ordinance to prohibit it. So they'd be able to drive on local roads. I should add that this is not something that Minnesota is doing alone. We have Kansas, Louisiana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, and Utah and Wyoming. All those states are doing what we're trying to do here tonight. These vehicles would all have to be licensed, titles, pay sales tax, pay whatever taxes are due, and of course have insurance. And if the VIN number doesn't match or is not appropriate, then they would not be able to be titled. I did some checking, and I checked in North Dakota to see if there's any reports of accidents involving these little trucks, which incidentally are 4-wheel drive, and they get about 40 miles to the gallon. And occasionally you might see one running around the Capitol. That one happens to be electric. But they're very handy for landscapers, for farmers, people that use them for delivery. Very practical and affordable. So members, that's what I'm asking for tonight. Is if you pass this tonight, we then will have an opportunity for more people to make a choice to drive a very efficient vehicle that fits their needs. Thank you, members.
Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This came through the Transportation Policy Committee, and we had a number of pictures showing how these things crumple up when they get hit by a bicycle or something like that, and they just are not made for standards of the roads, which we're talking about, not running around on the golf course, so forth. We had State Patrol, DVS, AAA in Minneapolis, and 3 people from the FAA that were testifying as to the unsafe construction of these vehicles for the highway and roadways, as we're talking about. So I would urge you to, for the Lord's sake, for the safety of people that might use these, to vote no on this amendment.
Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, I would urge you to vote yes on this amendment. Actually, in all those states where they were made legal, they had these same agencies come and testify against them, and one by one they were proven wrong. And in the states that they've used them on now, these facts don't prove wrong, and usually these agencies that testify like this are against everything in the world anyway. We've got a person in my area that approves of them. It's the chief of police of Mankato. And the problem is the city has okayed it and the county has okayed it, and to get all the different city parks and this and that, he can't get there because he can't go on the state road to get to different parts of the city. He can only go on township roads and city roads and county roads, which they've approved down there. And like I say, in other states where this is tried, these vehicles aren't a problem, and the chief of police thinks they should go statewide. So I'd urge your support of the amendment.
Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I too rise in support of this amendment. Business back in my area also would like to do more in this area. They are relatively safe vehicles in terms of their size. They're very handy, have good utility, great mileage. So I support the amendment of a representative from Fergus Falls. Thank you.
Representative Kreshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in support of Representative Nornis's amendment. These vehicles are no less safe than the bicycles that I see around the metro area and the many, many other vehicles that I see out there. And if we're going to start drawing the distinction here, I think we better go back and look at all the vehicles that we have on the road. So it's unfair. In our area, we have lots of these vehicles. They get us from pasture to pasture. They get us from farm to farm. And so let's try to be specific. Let's try to be consistent and support Representative Nornis' amendment.
The member from Otter Tail, Representative Nornis.
Madam Speaker, I just had to respond to Representative Earhart because I think it's a while ago. I give you credit for maybe just forgetting a little bit, but there were no bicycles. The FAA wasn't there. We did have a crash example. It was a Ranger pickup crashing into a little mini truck, and you could take a Ranger and match it up with a Escalade, and what would you have? So it's an unfair test. Unfair test. Members, we had 47 deaths last year riding by motorcycles. I know we could maybe talk about doing away with motorcycles because they're dangerous, but we don't. We had 2 airplane crashes in my county just a month ago. One was a fatal, one wasn't. We could talk about maybe grounding all airplanes because they do sometimes cause some danger. But let's just have some common sense tonight, pass this, and I don't think you'd see any harm or any danger by your actions.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Come on, Representative Earhart. Throw him a bone. Let him do this one. It's not going to hurt anything.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And for the reasons that Representative Earhart outlined, I would encourage a no vote. I thought you were going to talk about cheeseburgers or speed limits.
Representative Earhart.
You know, we've got a law enforcement crew here, the State Patrol, and we have safety people at DVS and also AAA looks closely at these things for insurance purposes and so forth. So until such time as they can pass road safety concerns that they all have, I just say vote no.
Representative Nornis.
Madam Speaker, I'd call that discrimination against little trucks, but I would just like to ask for a roll call, please.
Representative Nornis requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Seeing no further discussion to the amendment, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 65 ayes and 66 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moving to amend House File 1444 as follows. The amendment is coded A33.
The member from Anoka, Representative Runbeck.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I don't see the name or the number on the board.
A33.
A33. All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Right. Members, in the bill, the DVS is receiving $650,000 in new dollars to hire 7 individuals into the department. And there has been an issue in the past about the efficiency and the speed with which they are overturning titles and issuing titles. And what this is saying, let's hold them to a standard and increase the productivity in the Department of DVS. After all, we're giving them $650,000 to do that. So I would urge a green vote and would appreciate a roll call, Madam Speaker.
Representative Runbeck requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, Representative Runbeck's data is accurate on terms of the amount of money here, and but the reason I would urge a no vote here is that currently, actually today, I talked with the Department of Public Safety. As of today, they're turning things around in 6 days. Now it's variable. It's variable, so it'll go up and down depending on the time of year and different cars sales or whatever. But our expectation is with these new FTEs that we would have a 30-day period. So I think we're kind of getting into micromanaging the day-to-day workload of an agency, I think, in an unhealthy way when we have this type of amendment. It's really not our job to do that here as a House. So while I think that the intent is certainly laudable, and the reason we are funding these FTEs is to make sure that the turnaround time is much quicker than it is now, I think this is just a little bit of overreach on the part of our legislature, so I would urge a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion to the amendment, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
O'Neill moving to amend House File 1444 as follows. The amendment is coded A34.
The member from Wright, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I actually have an amendment to the amendment I'd like to move to.
There's an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
O'Neill moving to amend her amendment as follows. The amendment is coded A39.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Speaker. This amendment is just technical in nature, and I would just like to do a voice vote for that one, just to get to the amendment in the shape I'd like it.
All those in favor of the O'Neill, Representative Hornstein.
Well, I'm not sure. This deals with the e-workplace. Is that correct? Or oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Representative O'Neill, did you want to explain the?
It's just a technical fix to my main amendment that the staff found.
Seeing no further discussion.
Members,
Representative Hornstein.
Sorry, this is more than a technical amendment, members. This actually defunds the e-workplace program that we have in the bill. It's Representative Mason's initiative, and this is actually a very good program. This is a program at the University of Minnesota It encourages and provides technical assistance for people involved in telecommuting. There are 4,200 employees that are involved in this. We have companies like Aveda, Ecolab, Fairview Health Services, Hennepin County, Medtronic, Valspar, and others. It results in actually a decrease in congestion because people are working out of their homes. And so we certainly want to keep this provision in the bill. This is far more than technical. It actually defunds the program, and I would strongly urge a no vote on this.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Speaker. This is just a technical fix. The money stays in the same fund. It's just putting it into the shape that I want the entire amendment, the whole amendment. And this is just a small technical fix that the fiscal staff had found. And you'll see it all in the other amendment.
Representative Hornstein.
I was one step ahead of my colleague from Buffalo, so I apologize.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. To the amendment, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Speaker. So in the Transportation Committee, we heard over and over from all kinds of different corridors that came out: 14, 10, 494, 94, 610, and maybe even a few others, of the great need to expand and repair some of our corridors of commerce. So this bill, this amendment basically is looking for some more money for the trunk highway system, and it moves $49.1 million back into state road construction. Some of it comes from general fund, some of it does come from the trunk highway and goes back into a different fund. Let me give you some of the details. $4.6 million comes from the Metro Transit operations subsidies from the general fund, and it brings it back down to the governor's recommendation. The original was $130 million, and it moves it down to $83 million. And the increase over the previous spending is a 66% increase in the general fund for the Metro Transit. The Metro Transit operation subsidies. And so it would bring it back down to the governor's recommendation. It also would take $800,000 from the passenger rail, leaving $200,000 in for the biennium. And the federal money that is already in that, anticipated coming in, would be about $4.1 million. It moves $600,000 from Regional Development Commission, which is part of the trunk highway, and goes back into the trunk highway so that we can use it for roads and bridges. It moves $500,000 from the Safe Routes to Schools, because that's not been funded before and there was federal money for that, and that's a general fund appropriation. It also moves $300,000 from the Humphrey Institute from a general fund appropriation to do research for something that's essentially the same thing as the TFAC findings. So that seems to be somewhat duplicative. So, members, this is really a matter of priorities, and it's just $49.1 million out of a very large budget. And we're just trying to find a little bit more money to do roads and bridges. And, I think for myself, if we could just move just this little bit money over, I could even vote yes for this bill, because it's a great bill, but it's not quite all the way there, and I think this amendment gets us there. And what can we do with $49 million? Well, there's quite a few projects that we looked at that we could fund with $49 million. One of them, of course, is the I-94 project, expanding it from 4 lanes to 6 lanes for about a 2.5-mile segment of it. That would be about a $30 million project. Other members have brought other projects forward. Representative Newton has a project on Highway 10 that's about a $30 million project. There's several projects. I have 4 or 5 listed here that we could use this money for. So really this is a matter of priorities, members, and I encourage a green vote. And I'd like a roll call, please.
Representative O'Neill requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Dean.
Madam Speakers and members, I rise to speak against this amendment. For quite some time on Transportation Committee, as well as other areas, we've been talking about One Minnesota. Yesterday we passed an incredible education bill that has different things for different people throughout the state because of different needs. When it comes to transportation, the needs in the urban area are different than the needs in the suburban area, and those are different from the needs in the rural area. And we need to have a bill which recognizes all parts of the state of Minnesota, and this current amendment does great harm to transportation within the urban part of our state, which people have transportation needs just as well as other areas of the state. So I urge members to vote no on this amendment.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. And this is kind of the omnibus we don't like the University of Minnesota bus and rail transit amendment. And I find it just incredibly divisive. You know, one of the principles of this committee and the way that we want to approach transportation in the state is that we all, to quote Senator Wilson, we all do better and we all do better. We have a strong need for bus and rail transit in the metro area and actually throughout the state. And we also want to fund roads and bridges adequately, too. And that was the original vision for this bill. We'll talk a little bit more on third reading about why that's not happening. But I spoke a little bit to I won't repeat myself in terms of the e-workplace program. But what we're doing here is we're taking money from one need and to try to fund another instead of moving forward together. This is a pittance. And I don't disagree, Representative O'Neill, with your interest in funding roads. And I do appreciate that you use the term corridors of commerce because it's something that we want to fund throughout the state. But you are funding such a minuscule piece of what we need to have happen. To have $50 million or so, maybe we can build one lane of 1 mile of highway. And so instead then we're creating incredible problems with Metro Transit and some of these other areas that you're trying to take from. So I hope that we can figure out a way to move forward together. Urban, greater Minnesota, roads, bridges, transit. That's really the vision. Not to divide and conquer, not to take money from one pot to another, but to expand that pot so everybody benefits, because we are one Minnesota. Please vote no on this amendment.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Chair Hornstein. Let's just talk just a little bit about the funding, since you brought up the majority of this funding comes from Metro transit operations. And, you know, I have a spreadsheet in front of me that looks historically back. And when I look historically at what has been funded, I see a 10% increase, a 7% increase, a 4% increase, a 13% increase over previous biennium spending. And unfortunately, this bill has a 20% increase over the previous biennium spending. So that to me seems like that's excessive. And what this bill does is brings it back down to 10%, which is more in line with the 10%, 7%, 4%, and 13% increase over previous spending for the transit operations. And so I don't see this as divisive. I just see this as bringing it back in line with what we've historically done.
Seeing no further discussion to the amendment, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 65 ayes and 66 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moving to amend House File 1444 as follows. The amendment is coded A36.
The member from Anoka, Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to withdraw this amendment.
Representative Runbeck withdraws her amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moving to amend House File 1444 as follows. The amendment is coded A37.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, We have a transitway expansion plan underway in our state, and what this amendment does is expand upon that and add to it a requirement that there be a comparison of the costs and economic impacts between light rail, BRT, and park and rides, and to look at those three systems from the standpoint of their costs and their ability to really be the foundation of economic development. So it's kind of a high, medium, and low cost version, and what is going to work the best for the build out of the future. I urge a green vote, and I would like a roll call, Madam Chair.
Representative Runbeck requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And I had a good conversation with Representative Runbeck about this amendment. A lot of what I think the goal of this amendment is accomplished already in the processes that we use to plan and develop transitways. There's an alternatives analysis that has to go through all the different alternatives and discuss the costs and benefits of each of those. There's environmental impact statements in which the alternatives to the proposal need to be discussed from an environmental standpoint. But I think there is one part of this that I think is worthy of some, that's not duplicative, that I hope that Representative Runbeck and I can work on together in the future, which I think there's a lot of merit. And that is to really look at the economic impacts and benefits of specifically park and rides. And we talked about this together, Representative Runbeck and I, because there is actually some transit-oriented development taking place around some of these suburban park and rides. And this is often overlooked when we discuss the impacts of economic positive impacts of transit development. So while I would urge a no vote on this, I will commit here on the House floor to work with Representative Runbeck to see if we can develop some kind of a study or an analysis specifically about these park and rides, which I think is a void in terms of how we address this issue. So again, I think by and large it's duplicative except for that piece, and I would like to work with you on that, Representative Runbeck. So I'd urge a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion to the amendment, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moving to amend House File 1444, the third engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A38.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment is taken from a recent legislative auditor study called The Governance of Transit. Some very excellent recommendations in there. This recommendation would say that the lead agency, and I really strongly agree with this, the lead agency on transit build-out may not provide funding for further transit expansion until it's demonstrated that there is available and sufficient revenue to cover the costs, including maintenance and operation of the existing lines. So I think that when people consider the fact we've got a very expensive system being built out, but that some of these costs still have yet, or some of the revenue still is yet to be decided upon. It seems like this is a very good amendment, a very prudent accountability thing. So I would urge a green vote and would like a roll call.
Representative Runbeck requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And we get at some of these issues in the bill. We have a transitway study where we're asking the Met Council to start to account in advance for some of these capital costs and operating costs. It's kind of similar to a concept that Representative Holberg had advanced a couple of years ago. But I think that this just goes one step too far. You know, the idea of saying that they may not engage till all of these things are accomplished, it's just a little bit too I think, heavy-handed. We don't apply this standard to other forms of transportation. And so, I think our transportation system would kind of grind to a halt if we did apply this standard all across the board. So I think we are in the bill getting to some of the issues here that Representative Rumbeck is raising, that the legislative auditor has raised, but I think this just goes a step too far. And for that reason, I would urge a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion to the amendment, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 58 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Metsa moving to amend House File 1444 as follows. The amendment is coded 47.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this amendment in my community is about public safety. We've been having some problems with the Minnesota Department of Transportation providing reasonable routes in our communities. This would add significant costs for our local schools, businesses, and so what I'm doing with this is putting it together to send the DOT a message, and I would appreciate your support on the message, and I think, we might not run into problems like this in the future if we voted for a gas tax.
There's an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Metsa moving to amend his amendment as follows. The amendment is coded 053.
Representative Metsa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This simply removes the word implement from the language.
Discussion. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I appreciate, Representative Metsa, you're adding the amendment to the amendment. We talked about this yesterday. I was very concerned about the original amendment because, again, it was way too directive, and I think there were some costs that would have been associated with this. But with the amendment to the amendment, I think it becomes a little less severe, if you will. Representative Metsa is just asking MnDOT to be a little bit more accountable in terms of his district and choosing a route for this road. So with the amendment to the amendment, I think this is fine, and I appreciate your accommodating that concern that I had, Representative Metsa.
The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And yes, Representative Metsa, I'm having a flashback to your predecessor coming over here saying, Beard, you got to help me with this. This is the same issue. It still has not been resolved. I would just like to point out to the body, though, that the gas tax has absolutely nothing to do with this adventure. Nice try, Representative Metsa. But this actually has something to do with the EPA, of all things, and the Federal Highway Administration. People, if you saw this on a map, you would not believe it. Only can Washington screw up a highway site like this. So we got to cut MnDOT a little slack. They're kind of have their hands forced in this because it is a federal U.S. highway we're dealing with. But members, if we can keep the pressure on MnDOT, perhaps we can call our local congressman, and if anybody has a friend at the EPA, we can get this highway built, we can get it built right and save your downtown. Please vote yes.
Representative Metsa.
Again, thank you, Representative Beard, and thank you, Representative Hornstein. I just urge you all to vote green with me. Thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. To the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment as amended, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 1444 as amended.
Third reading. The member from Scott, Representative Beard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, Representative Hornstein had given some kudos in his opening remarks before we wrap up and vote on this bill. I just want to say thank you to the members, the Republican members of the committee who served with me on this committee. I, as the lead Republican, was privileged to serve with Representative Petersburg, Representative Hamilton, Some lady who made me look smarter than I deserve to be, Representative Holberg. Thank you for your input. Representative O'Neill, Representative Benson, and Representative Howe. We all appreciated you being on the committee, and Mr. Nisley, not Representative Nisley, Mr. Nisley, for looking out for us and keeping the paperwork straight. Representative Hornstein, excuse me, something like that, yes. It was a good committee. I appreciated you allowing us to thoroughly vet and discuss issues, even if we didn't agree on them. I will say that the privilege I had of chairing the committee the last 2 years, I was very fortunate to have the taxpayers send me enough money to do the largest construction bill in the history of the state until this one. And this year the taxpayers have sent us enough money that, Representative Hornstein, you beat me by $240 million in the new highway construction account. Nice work, Representative Hornstein.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, members, and I really appreciated the debate and the discussion. I have some very brief concluding remarks. I don't know if there's others that want to speak, but one of the greatest parts of this job for me to chair the Transportation Finance Committee was the opportunity I had to travel all around the state and start to talk to people about a passion of mine, and I think many of our members of our committee bipartisanly share a passion for transportation and how critical that is to our state and our infrastructure. And so just a couple of anecdotes about these stories and some of the testimony that we heard. You know, we've heard a lot about Highway 14, for example, and a woman by the name of Beth Hodgman came to speak to our committee. And Beth lost her husband Scott on election night in an accident on Highway 14. And I think back of all the testimony and all the people we've talked to, because Ms. Hodgman's story was so compelling, because it cuts to the core of what we're about here, which is to provide safety first and foremost. And so a lot of these corridors, we need to be addressing issues of safety. And then I had a great visit to Wilmer, and thank you, Representative Swatsky, for hosting me. And there was a dairy farmer named Harlan Matson who got up to speak, and he's also a Candy-Ojai County Commissioner. And he kind of schooled me as this Minneapolis legislator about this concept of farm to market and how important it was for our agricultural industry to have safe and accessible roads that work for them. And we, again, this was a really important concept that I learned about. In St. Cloud, I met with a group of clergy, and there was a Pastor James Alberts from Higher Ground Church in St. Cloud. So he talked to me about how important it was for his congregants to find jobs, and a matter of fact, he spoke very triumphantly about the fact that the church and people in the community supported a number of the congregants. They were able to find jobs, but then there was a problem. They couldn't get to work. So they had to form a jitney service that the church to shuttle people back and forth from these jobs, and sometimes they couldn't even do that because they have limited resources like everyone else. And so I thought his message was especially compelling. What good is a job if you can't get there? And then after that, we toured the New Flyer facility. It's an incredible plant just outside of St. Cloud. They make buses. They manufacture buses, send them all around North America. I got on a New York City bus, a Nashville bus, and there's that new bus smell. That new bus smell is amazing. Because the new bus smell is about jobs, and it's about growth, and it's about economic development. So it's not just building transit lines and building roads and bridges to promote businesses and job growth along those corridors. It's also the infrastructure of transit and transportation itself that creates jobs. I was very impressed with that New Flyer facility. And speaking of buses, I went down with Representative Beard's invitation down to Scott County, and they have a wonderful organization there called SCALE. It's a monthly meeting of different county commissioners and city officials and nonprofits, and I think there's even some business folks, and Representative Beard goes. He's been telling me all about this, so I decided to check it out. Very good donuts down there, Representative Beard. But I went, the day I went, they had a PowerPoint presentation about transit use in Scott County, which is skyrocketing. It's skyrocketing. And so it convinced me how important it is for us to build out our transit infrastructure, not just in the core cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, but extending it all the way down to Scott County and Dakota County and up to Anoka County. And then I had a great visit. Thank you, Representative Fitzsimmons and Representative O'Neill, for inviting me to St. Michael. And we had a fantastic conversation about transit there in the I-94 corridor. And I met someone named Sally Duffner, I believe, who is very involved. I think she's a senior leader, if not the director of premium outlets, you know, the outlet stores in Albertville. And so she talked about the incredible cost to her business because of the congestion on 94. And so I heard story after story from Minnesotans all around the state who were talking about their needs. Oh, I forgot. I went up to St. Louis County. That was my first visit. And I learned that St. Louis County has over 3,000 miles of county roads, and St. Louis County is the size of 4 eastern states combined. It's the largest county east of the Mississippi. Who knew? And so incredible needs up in St. Louis County as well in terms of their road and bridge infrastructure. And so, members, we really wanted to have a bill that would move the state significantly forward for our commerce, for our business, for our job creation, for mobility, for jobs. And we don't quite have that bill here before us. But I'm optimistic and hopeful that we're going to get there. We're not quite there. But we do need a comprehensive transportation approach as we had in 2008. Thank you, Representative Earhart, for really paving the way, as it were, for that legislation. It took a couple years before that happened, right, Representative Earhart? I don't think we've got time to wait a couple years for another comprehensive transportation bill. Because, members, transportation problems don't go away. They just get more expensive. And that's why I feel particular urgency that we have to move forward. So I think this bill is simply the beginning of a discussion. But it's the beginning of an urgent discussion so that we can build out our transit system in the metropolitan region and accelerate that system and expand our bus lines, and that we can actually fund these corridors of commerce that have been waiting and waiting and waiting for years. We know what those corridors are. That's in this bill, at least the framework for that Corridors of Commerce program. We don't earmark, but MnDOT has told us this would help Highway 14 potentially. This would help Highway 23 potentially. This would help I-94 potentially. So, members, let's move forward together bipartisanly, one Minnesota, business and labor together, urban and greater Minnesota together, and let's continue to work urgently and purposefully for a transportation system that accomplishes our goals of economic growth, development, and jobs. Members, I urge a green vote, but this is just the beginning of an urgent discussion. We need to come back, and we need to get a more comprehensive bill in the very near future. Members, I urge a yes vote.
Clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 101 ayes and 30 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.
Next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1451. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 1451 on the calendar for the day, first engrossment, an act relating to transportation.
Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would move to re-refer this House file to the Committee on Ways and Means. Members, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, in their infinite wisdom, realized today that a bill was up on the floor, so they thought today would be a good day to finish a fiscal note. And if you don't see that as a sign of what happens when we constitutionally dedicate funds to an agency and have no control over their operations, you should, because that's one of their problems. So, members, I would ask you to support the motion to re-refer. We'll fix it in Ways and Means and come back.
Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1510. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 1510 on the calendar for the day, the first engrossment, an act relating to Hennepin County.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in keeping with the transportation theme that we've just had for the last hour or so, this bill is for Hennepin County, and basically it's about Hennepin County wants to adopt MnDOT's design-build process. MnDOT has changed the way they've done their design-build authority the last few years. Hennepin County didn't mirror their changes because they liked the process that they had, but now they want to see that the MnDOT's process is working well, and they want to switch over to the MnDOT process for doing design build on the roads to make it easier for our contractors and cut the red tape. The same contractors that are bidding on the Hennepin County roads are also bidding on the MnDOT projects, and having one process for them and one set of rules for them to move forward with makes it easier for everybody. It's less red tape for our contractors. And I urge a green vote.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Leidiger moving to amend House File 1510, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I actually support this bill, but Representative Nelson, I believe since, well, first of all, I believe in the design build concept. It certainly has worked well. We've got a good history of how it's saved dollars in the state. There have been some issues with it, and some of the contracts that have come out in that low bidder is not always the organization that gets a contract. So my amendment does not necessarily deal with that head on, but what it does do with the Hennepin County adopting the MnDOT rules is it tells the county to go ahead and have more disclosure on their website, put the RFP and RFQs on there so that we can get more transparency on what the scope of the job is about. So I think this should be looked at as a friendly amendment, and I ask for a green vote.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Representative Leidiger, I do not support this amendment. Again, we're trying to line up the processes, the same process for Hennepin County and for MnDOT, so there our bidders that are bidding on these projects have less red tape and less confusion in the bidding process. So I urge a red vote.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion.
Mr. Speaker, I request a roll call on this, please.
Roll call being requested. There's 15 hands. There will be a roll call. The clerk will take the roll. Clerk will close the roll. There being 58 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Drazkowski moving to amend House File 1510, the first engrossment, as follows. The amendment is coded A3.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, this amendment suggests that really that they would be required to have all their ducks in a row in terms of the funding for the project and make certain that that was demonstrated before going ahead with the authority offered in the bill for the multimodal transportation projects. You know, members, we've got situations in the past here already, questions that have arisen around, for instance, the Central Corridor and whether or not the federal government, given their current situation with $17 trillion in debt and the solvency issues that are there, the sequester issues, etc., that there's questions about whether they were able to follow through with their commitments. I understand some of these projects, it's in the neighborhood of 50% that are brought forward by the federal government. So this amendment would basically say they need to demonstrate that those dollars are lined up and assured to come before they have the authority. I'd appreciate your support for the amendment. Members, ask for a roll call, Mr. Speaker.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I urge a red vote on this amendment. Again, we're trying to line up MnDOT's design build with MnDOT's, or Hennepin counties with MnDOT's, and this would just be another piece of red tape that's there and more confusion. Plus, Hennepin County is not the person that's doing the multimodal transportation system. That's the Met Council and the Transit Board, and Hennepin County is a small portion of that, and so it's not going to get at what Representative Drazkowski wants, and so I urge a red vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. Savick votes no. There being 51 ayes and 79 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no more amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 1510.
Third reading. Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask if the author would yield, please.
He will yield. Representative Benson.
Representative Nelson, can you tell me, is the allowing the losing bidder to receive a stipend something new in these in terms of the process for a bid?
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, that's in the current MnDOT regulations.
Representative Benson. Okay. Representative Beard.
Mr. Chairman, if I may speak to that just briefly, because that is an important concept in design build. When a department goes out and solicits consortiums of contractors to come together for a project, oftentimes they will invest proprietary and intellectual property in putting together unique and interesting plans that maybe an engineer at MnDOT or at Hennepin County didn't think of. Those cost money, and it's been proven over the years as we put those together that we actually get better results and better input if we compensate them for a portion of the cost. So that's been a standard part of design build, and one that I think Hennepin County probably benefit from as well.
Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the author yield?
He will yield. Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Nelson, I'm looking at sections 4 and 5 on page 3, and on line 3.18, it says that the short list has to have at least 2, but not more than 5 for phase, I believe, for phase 1 of the process. And then if you go down to section 5 in the evaluation area on line 34, you lose the concept of having at least 2. So you have no minimum, and I'm wondering why the deviation there.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think they just missed it. I don't know. I think they must have just missed that, putting the 2 in there when they took the 3 out in the drafting.
Representative Holberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Nelson, is this going to conference, or is there a place to fix this? Or I don't think you want to set up a design build criteria with only one firm named in the selection process.
Representative Nelson.
Mr. Speaker, I guess I could question for you if that, I mean, inquiry, can we in our rules do a modification of that, or do we have to do a formal amendment? Because I guess I think I agree with what Representative Holberg said.
Representative Nelson, you could do, the House could get 90 votes to waive the rule and do an amendment. Right now, you could send it to the Senate and they could fix it and they could send it back. You can't do a modification, though. Oh, Representative Holberg.
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative Nelson, I didn't have here an answer to my question as far as if this was going to the Senate and what kind of the path for this is, but I think it's a flaw in your bill that should be corrected.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Holberg, it's going to the Senate. They have not passed it yet, so we could fix it, send it there, and I'll give you my commitment that I'll make sure that gets done.
Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Nelson, I know it's late, and I don't see a cross-reference to the data practices standard around this process. It's kind of a phased process where certain elements of the data and bids become public at certain points in the process when it's done at MnDOT, and I'm not familiar with Hennepin County's authority, and I'm curious as to how that's addressed.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And from reading it yesterday, and I'll have to go back and look at it, I believe we're not changing that part of the Hennepin County statute, and I believe it's what they've got now, which I believe is similar to MnDOT's process.
Well, Mr. Speaker, and if we might wait a second, I'd actually really like to have the answer to this, whether or not I don't see a cross-reference in this authority, and given that if they're taking on the MnDOT process and procedure, then in my mind they should be held to the same standards of disclosure that have been worked on and modified over a number of years.
Representative Nelson.
Mr. Speaker, would we...
Representative Nelson.
Just lay it over. Mr. Speaker, I guess Representative Holberg has the floor, and I think what we could do is send this to Rules and fix it there and make sure that that's what it is.
Representative Nelson moves that the bill be re-referred to the Committee on Rules. Any discussion of that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1738. The clerk will report the bill. 738, yes.
House File 738 on the calendar for today, an act relating to the Metropolitan Council.
Representative Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have been tasked with the enviable opportunity to carry the housekeeping bill on water waste management for the Met Council. It simply does, well, it does a few things. It takes out language that is obsolete going back to 1972. It changes a reporting function for small towns, reducing paperwork for them as they do not need to be in compliance with the 1972 U.S. Water Pollution Control Act. It does allow for towns that have reached bills that are higher than they're able to pay or would be a burden for them to pay, and it allows the Met Council to have these towns set up a payment plan, as that is not explicitly given to them right now. It also makes language that says that the Met Council must tax a levy for debt service to make it more permissive, that they don't have to if they don't want to, if they can find a separate way of taking care of it without doing the tax, which they've, according to the Met Council, never done and have no plans on doing either.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
McDonald moving to amend House File 738 as follows. The amendment is coded A1.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My amendment is pretty simple. It just deletes the word with interest and also determined by the Council. As Representative Isaacson said, that what his amendment does is allows towns to set up a payment plan when they are required to hook up with the new wastewater treatment plants or dealing with water issues. While I think that may be fair, I think it's unfair to have them have to pay interest upon the deferral payment as well. Especially now when we passed $6 million worth of water fees to the cities, this is an opportunity to save every city that has that hooks up some funding. And with that, I do have a question for Representative Isaacson, if he'd yield.
He will yield. Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Isaacson, question regarding the property exempt for taxation, and what exactly, how much land does the council have, and how many properties are then exempt in that section of the statute?
Representative Isaacson.
Mr. Speaker, Representative McDonald, I'm a little confused. Are we on the amendment to do take away the ability to charge interest, or are we talking about a separate part of the bill at this point?
Representative McDonald.
Well, I'm sorry, it is getting late. I actually tied the two in to save time so we can get home sooner, but why don't we just deal with, at this point, the amendment then, and I'll ask you to yield later on.
Representative Isaacson.
Members, I will ask you respectfully to oppose this amendment for a couple of reasons. One, I believe that the amendment would encourage cities to ask for a deferral when it's possible they won't need one, and I'm a little concerned that if there isn't a nominal interest charge, and I do mean nominal, it will be passed on in other ways to pay for the deferment, as they'll lose the real value of the money they're not being paid. Thank you.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, then, just lastly, I plead with you to actually vote green on this particular one, because it will save cities money. When the Met Council forces the cities to hook up with the wastewater treatment plants and they don't have the funds necessary and they have to defer the payments, at least this gives them the opportunity not to have interest on top of that. So it's kind of a double whammy. So it does save the cities money, even if it's nominal. Every nominal penny saved to the taxpayer, in my opinion, in small towns and even larger towns, is a good thing, Representative Isaacson. It certainly is a good thing for you to vote yes on this, so I encourage a green vote this late at night.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 738.
Third reading. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Ruskowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wondering if Representative Isaacson would yield.
He will yield. Representative Druskowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Isaacson, I'm reading Section 1 of the bill, and it's kind of surprising. I think I wonder if Representative Wagenius has reviewed this or not, but we strike out language about target pollution loads being taken out of the bill. You know, potentially if that was someone on our side of the aisle offering the bill, I would think that would be something we might do. But so I'm kind of surprised. Have you? Can you tell us why we're removing target pollution loads under Section 1?
Representative Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Drakowski. Because we don't use target pollution loads anymore to measure that, they now use total max daily load, and that is the way it works, so this is obsolete language. Thank you.
Representative Drakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Isaacson continue to yield?
He sure will. Representative Drakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Isaacson, why don't we include TMDLs in that section of the bill then to replace it instead of simply leaving it completely out of the bill?
Representative Isaacson.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Drakowski, I'm thinking along the same lines you are, and I asked the exact same question, and it's because the Pollution Control Agency already does it in the metro area, and there's no need to have duplicative services. So the Pollution Control Agency does it, and they're the ones that use total max daily load.
Representative Drakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Isaacson.
Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. Gunther votes aye. There being 118 ayes and 13 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Murphy E. for the Committee on Rules. Pursuant to Rule 121 and 333, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for Friday, April 26, 2013. House file numbers 459, 458, and 580. Senate file numbers 834 and 324. House file numbers 814, 969, 975, and 767.
Motions and resolutions. Copies of the non-controversial motions and resolutions are online and at the front desk. If there's no objections, we'll take action on those motions first. Hearing no objection, those motions prevail. Announcements. Representative Abler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Kurt Rutson from ARC has asked me to invite you all to, I think there's a rally tomorrow at noon in the Rotunda. They're having Disability Day. They're concerned about some things, including funding, and they wanted me to make sure that you know, go say hi to them. They could be around the Capitol, and you're always very nice to them, so they're looking forward to seeing you. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Thursday, April 25th, 2013.
Representative Murphy moves when the House adjourn today, it adjourn until 10 a.m. Thursday, April 25th, 2013. All in favor say aye. All opposed no. The motion prevails. Representative Murphy.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Murphy moves that the House do now adjourn. All in favor say aye. All opposed no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Thursday, April 25th, 2013.